The Committee on Homeland Security, Subcommittee on Oversight and Management Efficiency will come to order. Hello, everybody. The purpose of this hearing is to examine K9 programs across DHS and how K9s contribute to the critical Homeland Security mission. I'm going to deviate from the normal discourse here so we can expedite thinking about votes being early here. So we are pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today. The witnesses' entire written statements will appear in the record. The Chair will introduce the witnesses first and then recognize each of you for your testimony. The ranking member. Welcome. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Damian Montez, is that correct? Did I have your pronunciation correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Is the Director of Customs and Border Protection's K9 training program. Mr. Montez began his career in the U.S. Marine Corps. Subsequently, he graduated from the Department of Defense's Military Working Dog Handler course and is a former handler. Mr. Montez joined CBP in 2002. We thank you for your service, sir. Mr. Peter Hackes, is that correct, I think?
Sir, it's Hackes.
Hackes, thank you. Is the Acting Deputy Chief of Law Enforcement Operations in the Specialty Programs Division at the U.S. Border Patrol. In his capacity, Mr. Hackes oversees the Border Patrol K9 program, all-terrain vehicle program, horse patrol, and other programs. He has attended the Border Patrol Handler course and is a former handler. Prior to joining the Border Patrol, Mr. Hackes served in the U.S. Navy. And thank you for your service, sir. It's Melanie Harvey?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Melanie Harvey is Director of TSA's Threat Assessment Division for the Office of Security Operations. The Threat Assessment Division provides oversight and support to over 4,500 specialized screening assets across the nation and territories, including explosives, ordnance, and disposal experts and explosive detection K9 teams. She has held her current position since 2013 and joined TSA in 2004. Welcome. Dr. Patrick Carrick, correct? Is the Acting Chief Scientist and Director of the Homeland Security Advanced Research Projects Agency within the Science and Technology Directorate at DHS. In this position, he oversees the management of the National Technology Research and Development for DHS. Prior to joining DHS, Dr. Carrick held positions in the U.S. Air Force. And we thank you, sir, and all of us wish we could put scientist behind our name. Dr. Jennifer Brown serves as a serves as a K9 search specialist and team veterinarian for Florida Task Force 2 Urban Search and Rescue. She has served on multiple urban search and rescue teams and was deployed to Mississippi and Louisiana following Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. And thank you, ma'am. Thank you all for being here today. The Chair, are we going to do the statements? We're going to go through them? Okay. The Chair recognizes Mr. Montez for an opening statement.
Good afternoon, Chairman Perry, Ranking Member Correa, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today about the K9 training program at U.S. Customs and Border Protection. I am the director of the CBP K9 training program. I'm responsible for the administrative and operational training oversight of CBP's 2 K9 training centers located in Front Royal, Virginia, and El Paso, Texas. The CBP K9 training program is the fusion of 2 legacy training facilities, the legacy U.S. Customs Service K9 Enforcement Training Center and the U.S. Border Patrol National K9 Facility. The merger of these 2 entities allowed the CBP K9 training program to build on decades of established expertise in law enforcement K9 training and to capitalize on best practices. The primary mission of the CBP K9 training program is to provide the initial basic training and certification to CBP officer, agent, K9 handler teams, and instructors. We provide training in concealed human and narcotic detection, currency and firearms detection, human remains cadaver detection, tracking and trailing, search and rescue, patrol, pedestrian processing, and a recertification instructor course. Under the direction of the Office of Training and Development, the CBP K9 training program also offers formal training to various federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies. Additionally, the CBP K9 training program supports canine training initiatives under the direction of the Office of International Affairs. In coordination with the Department of Defense, State, and USAID, we help provide capacity building and technical assistance to our partners abroad. For example, in 2015, at the request of the government of Tanzania, CBP leadership and the U.S. Ambassador to Tanzania and the CBP Canine Training Program conducted an initial assessment of the government of Tanzania's capabilities with detection canines and canine training. Following the assessment, the CBP Canine Training Program developed a customized curriculum with Ivory as a newly trained order. We were able to train 4 Tanzanian police officers who are posted at the Dar es Salaam Seaport and Airport. The teams have already had success with both Ivory and narcotic seizures. While OTD develops and establishes initial training requirements of CBP canines, the utilization, maintenance, and deployment of canine teams is managed by CBP's operational components, the Office of Field Operations and the United States Border Patrol. OFO and USBP teams are trained for specific missions as it relates to the laws in which they are governed. Our training cadre is comprised of expertise CBP law enforcement officers and agents from OFO and USBP, also known as course developer instructors, who serve a 3 to 5 year instructional assignment. The canine training process is very much a team effort. In addition to our dedicated team of instructors and colleagues across our agency, CBP's Laboratories and Scientific Services Directorate deserves special recognition. Utilizing traditional scientific support, LSSD conducts special research amid to optimize the detection and identification of signature odor profiles for certain narcotics. With respect to detecting fentanyl, CBP scientists have been conducting special research to determine the detection and identification of signature odor profiles for fentanyl compounds. The relevant components within CBP are all working together to assess the feasibility of safely and effectively adding fentanyl as a trained odor to OFO's deployed narcotic detection teams. The pilot project will continue through the remainder of 2017, with evaluations conducted as scheduled benchmarks. In conclusion, I'm honored to be part of the CBP Canine Training Program and appreciate the opportunity to share our efforts with you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And now, I believe we have 2 CBP canine handlers here today to demonstrate the capabilities of the OFO Canine Program. Our first demonstration will be led by CBP Agriculture Specialist Canine Handler Christy Courier and her canine Callan. Agriculture Inspector Courier joined CBP in the mid-2000s and since 2008 has been working as an agriculture canine handler. Agriculture Canine Inspector Courier's canine Callan joined her at Dulles International Airport in 2012. Kalen's perky disposition is perfect for working around thousands of people daily. So if I can draw your attention to the second demonstration. Okay. The second demonstration will be led by CBP Officer Robert Stone with his Canine Pharaoh. CBPO Stone retired from the Air Force after 20 years of service and joined Legacy Customs in 1998. In 2008, CBPO Stone became a canine handler at Dulles International Airport. He and his canine partner Pharaoh have been working together since 2014 with numerous accomplishments under their belt.
Committee can stand fast. We just want to recognize Ms. Harvey for her remarks because she didn't give them yet. So, Ms. Harvey, please.
Thank you. I understand we're going to do the demo first. So it is my honor to introduce you to Doug Timberlake and his K9 partner Reverso, who work as a passenger screening K9 team at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to simulate a checkpoint operation at the airport where passengers would file past us, and Reverso is going to screen them as they go by, and he will alert and let us know if he sees anything or smells anything.
What's he trying to smell?
Explosives.
Yep, we'll move on here. Due to votes on the House floor, the subcommittee will stand in recess subject to the call of the chair of the subcommittee. We'll reconvene the following the vote series. The subcommittee will come to order. We'll get back on script here. All right. The chair recognizes himself for an opening statement. As we welcome law enforcement officers from across our nation to Washington, D.C. to commemorate National Police Week, we'd be remiss not to thank the unsung hero partners of many of our forces, canines. Earlier this month, near an immigration checkpoint in Tucson, Arizona, a U.S. citizen was arrested for narcotics smuggling after a Border Patrol K9 unit detected an odor emitting from a hearse, which produced over $33,000 worth of marijuana concealed within a casket. After the Twin Towers fell on 9/11, hundreds of talented K9 teams were integral to search and rescue attempts, searching through 16 acres of rubble where the World Trade Center once stood to find tragic remains or those lucky enough still to be alive. TSA's K9 team screened approximately 26 million passengers in fiscal year 2016 and responded to 35,000 unattended items within the transportation system in 2016 to ensure no explosives were present and mitigate the impact of shutdowns and evacuations. And finally, in October of 2016, Customs and Border Protection employees at JFK Airport said a happy farewell to retiring Jasper, a CBP agriculture canine credited with over 17,000 seizures and over 23,000 interceptions. Jasper thwarted smugglers' attempt to sneak everything and anything past customs, from illegal whale meat to live turtles. These are just a few examples of many ways canines contribute to the safety and security of our homeland. DHS maintains robust canine programs with teams ranging from patrol units with the U.S. Secret Service, explosive detection units with the Coast Guard and TSA, and urban search and rescue units within FEMA. CBP alone has approximately 1,500 canine teams, the largest overall canine program at DHS, with distinct mission sets including, but not limited to, tactical operations along the border, detection of narcotics, firearms, undeclared currency, and concealed persons attempting illegal entry into the U.S., and detection of undeclared agricultural products with the potential to wreak havoc on U.S. agricultural resources. In total, 6 operational components use canines: CBP and Border Patrol, the TSA, the Coast Guard, the Secret Service, the Federal Protective Service of the National Protection and Programs Directorate, and FEMA. Additionally, the Science and Technology, or S&T Directorate, provides ongoing research and support to canine explosive detection skills training. For example, just recently, S&T announced a grant of $198,000 for a wearable device on CBP canines that provide real-time monitoring of the dog's vital signs while operating in the field. With the highest threat environment since 9/11, our law enforcement personnel must have the tools they need to keep Americans safe. A dog's sense of smell is vastly more sensitive and acute than a human's, and their detection abilities are unrivaled. As terrorists seek to exploit any vulnerability in our security, the Department's use of canines is that much more important. For example, as we've seen in recent attacks at the Brussels Zaventem Airport and Istanbul Ataturk Airport, aviation systems remain a large target. And as terrorist capabilities become more sophisticated with abilities to circumvent our technological systems, a canine's nose may be our last line of defense. Canine contributions to the security of our nation are vast along our borders, at our ports of entry, in our airports, and beyond. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today on the important contributions of the Department's impressive, broad use of canines. And I want to just thank you, too, as individuals that sacrifice a portion of your life to deal with the dogs. The dogs don't come alone, right? So we appreciate that as well. We're really, really thrilled to have you here. And with that, Chair Rao recognizes the ranking minority member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from California, Mr. Correa, for his statement.
Chairman Perry, thank you very much for holding today's hearing, and I want to thank all of our guests today, witnesses, and of course, those wonderful canines for being here today. Look forward to discussing with each and every one of you the Department of Homeland Security's canine programs, a tool used every day to assist DHS in keeping our nation safe. While most of us, of course, as citizens, love those little four-legged animals, I think most of us in our society are not totally aware of their specialized skills. Several DHS components, including FEMA, TSA, and CBP, acquire and train canines to assist us in various DHS missions, from helping secure our borders to offering aid during natural disasters by locating victims. The importance of the work of the various DHS K9 programs cannot be overstated. All of us know a dog can smell 10 times better, 10,000 times better than a human being, and they can also detect over 19,000 odors associated with explosives. Tremendous, tremendous potential, tremendous skills. I look forward to hearing today about the research and development conducted by the Science and Technology Directorate to assist DHS, its components in explosive detection. Also look forward to hearing about the use of new low-cost, non-hazardous canine training aids, which are of particular interest to me. And I understand that we will be seeing, and we did see some demonstrations earlier today. I also welcome testimony from CBP, which possesses the largest and most diverse law enforcement canine program in the country. I understand that just a few months ago, CBP canines in Arizona were credited with the recovery of $400,000 worth of cocaine and heroin, meth along the border during 3 separate vehicle inspections in a 24-hour time period. Despite the tremendous work of these canines, I understand there's a shortage at ports of entry. And I look forward to discussing what, if any, additional resources you all need to assure that those canine teams that we need are actually there to secure our country. I also look forward to hearing about the important work of the TSA National Explosive Detection Canine Program, which is currently the largest explosive detection canine program at DHS. TSA has received continuous support from Congress, and because of its importance to our securing our nation, mass transit, cargo, and other areas. With that being said, I am concerned that the administration for its fiscal year 2018 is proposing a cut to the TSA Visible Intermodal Prevention and Response, or VIPR operation that specializes in detecting suspicious activities at airports using canines. I'm hoping that your testimony today will further address the issues of the importance of fully funding your program as opposed to funding a border wall. A few weeks ago, I was at San Isidro Crossing. I took a tour, and the agents were telling me that most of the contraband coming into this country comes across in automobiles. Most of the smuggling happens in cars and other vehicles, and that essentially stated that a lot of the dogs that were being used as the canines were very important, very key to detecting a lot of this contraband. So I'm hoping again that your testimony can focus on these issues. How can we do your job better? What resources we as policymakers can present to you that you can continue to keep our country safe. Again, thank all the witnesses for being here today. Thank you for your testimony. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield my time, the balance of my time, back to you, sir.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Other members of the subcommittee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. The chair asks unanimous consent for the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Rogers, and if he arrives, and Mr. Palmer to be permitted to sit on the dais and participate in today's hearing without objection, so ordered. We were privileged to hear from Mr. Montez, and we thank him for his statement. We are now going to move to Mr. Jaquez. The chair now recognizes you for your statement.
Good afternoon, Chairman Perry, Ranking Member Correa, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today about the United States Border Patrol Canine Program. The USBP Canine Program has been a cornerstone in Border Patrol operations since our first 4 canine handlers graduated in 1987, 30 years ago last month. Today, our canine teams are central to our operational strategy, providing a specialized capability to conduct targeted enforcement operations to disrupt the flow of smuggled humans and narcotics and deny profits to transnational criminal organizations. At the end of FY16, the USBP Canine Program had a total of 832 active canine teams, which are trained, maintained, and enhanced by 295 USBP canine instructors. We assign K9 teams to USBP sectors based upon their individual operational requirements. The operational needs of various checkpoints, line watches, transportation checks, and parcel facilities are some of the factors considered when identifying the number of canines needed for any particular sector. One of the significant operational contributions of our canine teams lies in their capability to detect concealed humans. This capability is valued for several reasons. Detecting a concealed human may result in the apprehension and arrest of a person illegally present in the United States, a wanted criminal, a terrorist, or the detection of concealed humans who may be in danger because they are concealed within a conveyance in unsafe conditions. During FY16, USBP K9 teams were responsible for over 41,000 human apprehensions. Not all of these apprehensions occurred at our checkpoints. Canines are also a valuable tool in the field deployment. Another mission of the USBP K9 team is the detection of narcotics. During FY16, our K9 team seized over 419,000 pounds of narcotics and more than $5.9 million in currency. Only a couple weeks ago, on May 2nd, a K9 team in El Centro sector aided the detection and seizure of narcotics valued at more than $1.3 million, including 20.6 pounds of heroin, 20.1 pounds of methamphetamine, and $18,000 in currency, all in one single event. No monetary value can be placed on saving human lives, another task USBP K9 teams have to do. During FY16, USBP Search and Rescue Canines rescued 15 individuals.
Suspected terror.
During one notable rescue, El Centro sector received a request from Imperial County Sheriff's Office to respond to a 911 call. An El Centro sector K9 team responded, and while walking into the area, the K9 located 4 subjects in distress. All 4 subjects were provided medical treatment and turned over to agents for disposition and processing. USBP K9 teams are also used in the search for specific individuals. For example, USBP track and trailing K9 teams assisted in the manhunt for murder suspect Matthew Eric Freen in September 2014 at the request of the Pennsylvania State Police. Over the course of 7 weeks, over 100 BORTAC and BORSTAR intel personnel were deployed to Pennsylvania, including mission-essential gear and equipment in search of the fugitive. Freen was successfully apprehended on October 30th, 2014, without further incident. In conclusion, I'm honored to be a part of the U.S. Border Patrol K9 program and appreciate the opportunity to share our efforts with you today. I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Jaquez. The chair recognizes Ms. Harvey for her opening statement.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Perry, Ranking Member Correa, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. TSA's National Explosives Detection K9 Team program is funded to train and deploy 1,047 K9 teams. Our teams operate in nearly every state in the country and are allocated to 82 airports and 33 mass transit and surface systems. TSA's K9 program began under the Federal Aviation Administration in 1972 after a TWA flight from JFK to LAX received an anonymous bomb threat. The aircraft returned to JFK, where passengers were evacuated, and a bomb-sniffing dog named Brandy from the New York City Police Department identified the explosive device minutes before it was set to detonate. This success led to the creation of the FAA's initial K9 program of 40 K9 teams at 20 airports. The program transferred to TSA in 2002 and has expanded over time to include more teams and broader capabilities, such as passenger screening. Many of the teams working in the aviation environment are comprised of a TSA K9 and a law enforcement handler from a state or local agency. For these teams, TSA provides and trains the dog, trains the handler, provides training aids and storage, and conducts annual team certifications. TSA provides each participating agency a small stipend to reimburse some operational costs. In return, the agencies agree to deploy the teams in their assigned transportation environment at least 80% of the time and to respond to threats in 45 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Participation in the program is voluntary, and these agreements are a great example of federal, state, and local partners working together to protect people and secure transportation. In addition to the law enforcement teams, 372 of TSA's federal employees are also K9 handlers. Nearly 50% are veterans, such as Mr. Timberlake, who you met earlier, who is a veteran of the United States Army. In addition to traditional explosive detection work, TSA-led teams are trained to search people and their accessible property as they move through terminals and checkpoints. The passenger screening canine, or PSC methodology, is complex and operationally demanding. The handlers must observe the canine and passengers while recognizing subtle changes in behavior of their canine. TSA teams work primarily during peak travel times in airport screening checkpoints where they have the opportunity to screen the highest volume of people and property. All handlers in TSA's program are trained at TSA's K9 Training Center, co-located with DoD's Military Working Dog Program at Joint Base San Antonio, Lackland. Teams are trained in explosives and search methods across 17 transportation venues, including a passenger screening checkpoint, baggage claim area, wide and narrow body aircraft, and light rail cars and stations. This year, TSA will train approximately 300 canines and teams and conduct nearly 900 annual recertifications of deployed canine teams. TSA also provides explosive detection canines and training support to our DHS partners in the United States Coast Guard and Federal Protective Service. DHS Science and Technology is another critical partner of TSA's K9 program, enabling us to bridge the gap between science and the real world. Within the past year, DHS S&T's Detection K9 program developed and delivered safe training aids that enhance our team's ability to find homemade explosives. They routinely conduct operational testing and recommend actionable improvements that strengthen the team's overall effectiveness. This week, at an airport in North Carolina, S&T chemists and canine experts are working alongside our handlers to understand the canine's ability to detect a particular threat. On any given day, TSA's K9 program has 800 canine teams on duty in 115 airports and surface transportation systems. They respond to 109 calls for unattended items or vehicles, avoiding evacuation in most cases, and our teams screen 120 to 130,000 passengers at airport checkpoints. The K9 teams are a critical layer of TSA's security system. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about TSA's K9 program, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Harvey. The chair now recognizes Dr. Carrick for his opening statement.
Good afternoon, Chairman Perry, Ranking Member Correa, and members of the subcommittee. It is an honor to come before the subcommittee today to offer my testimony on critical canine contributions that the Science and Technology Directorate has made in support of the Homeland Security mission. Detection canines are the best and most versatile mobile detection tool that we have today to protect the homeland. Our mission is to provide the Homeland Security enterprise with the tools, techniques, and knowledge to better understand, train, and utilize these canines to detect hazards. We work with the DHS partners represented here, as well as FEMA, other federal agencies, state and local law enforcement to provide central focal point for DHS K9 research and development. Our detection canine efforts have historically addressed the challenges facing explosives threat to the homeland, focusing on how we can better understand and utilize the strengths and limitations of these specially trained canines. This year, the Canine Detection Program successfully transitioned a patented, non-hazardous, peroxide-based training aid for operational use by the TSA K9 program. Unlike narcotics, where the actual materials can be used for training, peroxide-based explosives can be somewhat unstable, making the need for a safe training aid crucial. This training aid addresses the threat used in Brussels and Paris and allows for safe use in operational scenarios such as on vehicles, baggage, and on person. This training aid has been distributed to all TSA K9 teams at over 100 airports nationwide and has been licensed for commercial production and sale to over 4,000 domestic explosive detection K9 teams in the law enforcement community. We have identified a national challenge. Many of our nation's explosive detection K9 teams have limited access to the latest knowledge on explosive threat odors. As a result, this year, our Detection K9 program has launched the Regional Explosives Detection Dog Initiative, or READY for short, to provide a series of regionally based events for law enforcement detection K9 teams. While the K9 teams get valuable experience and an independent look at how they are doing, the S&T team gleans important perspective on the need for future R&D investments and insight into K9 detection operational readiness. The first READY event was held in Southwest Florida in March, with a second event in Connecticut in April. Several more events are being planned throughout the country in the coming months, including an event in Miami next week. We have also an initiative with several partner law enforcement agencies in the National Capital Region to understand the possibilities and the limitations of using detection dogs to find person-borne improvised explosive devices in mass transit, rail, and large crowd event venues. This year, the scope of the Detection K9 program was officially expanded to focus on all threats, including challenges with narcotics detection, human tracking, and urban search and rescue. We established an agreement with FEMA to begin addressing some of the challenges of the urban search and rescue teams. We are in the second phase also of a development of a low-profile K9 wearable vest to provide K9 teams with a fully stabilized video, high-fidelity, GPS-denied situations, and communications from K9 to the handler to the commander. This effort is being executed through S&T's Small Business Innovative Research Program. We also have an active effort working with CBP to identify K9 wearable and ruggedized technologies that can monitor K9 health signs while the K9 is working in harsh environments. This concludes my testimony, and I look forward to the opportunity to address any of your concerns and questions.
Thank you, Dr. Carrick. The chair now recognizes Dr. Brown for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Perry, Ranking Member Correa, and the members of the subcommittee. Thank you tremendously for allowing me to testify today on behalf of our Urban Search and Rescue Canines. I'm here representing Florida Task Force 2, based out of Miami and sponsored by the City of Miami. I'm here to testify on the important role of the Urban Search and Rescue Canine in both local, state, and national, as well as international disaster response. Canines have been an integral role of the Urban Search and Rescue teams since their inception in the early 1980s. Their role is to locate survivors and victims of both man-made and natural disasters, from Oklahoma City to the 9/11 attacks, to things like Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, and most recently, Hurricane Matthew. I currently serve Florida Task Force 2 as our task force veterinarian, as well as a canine search specialist. You've met one of my live fine search and rescue dogs who's less than impressed that I'm here providing testimony for you today. In addition, I have one other nationally certified live fine dog, as well as a nationally certified human remains detection dog. The role of canines in urban search and rescue is critically important. They play a vital role in the location of survivors. While survivors have been documented to be found in collapsed structures up to 13 to 14 days, obviously we humans have biologic needs of food and water, as well as potential trauma can certainly limit the survival time. So it's essential that we locate and find victims in disasters quickly and get them out. These factors emphasize the necessity for rapid identification, location, and rescue of any survivors. This is where our canine search teams, live fine dogs, come in, is for that rapid identification so that those people can be rescued. And certainly that the dog's keen sense of smell, with over up to 300 million olfactory receptors compared to our puny 5 million, that these canines make profoundly effective detectors when well trained for specific scents. The live fine dog is obviously trained to find and identify non-specific human scent, whereas our human remains detection dogs obviously are deceased victims. These canines are also capable of working in some of the most extreme environments, whether they be a rubble pile, in a collapsed structure, or a wide area mass natural disaster. These canines also are far superior than any current technology at locating both live and deceased victims. Our canine search teams in the urban search and rescue system are comprised of a single handler and their canine who must undergo some pretty rigorous training as well as certification process in order to be deployable within the system. Handlers are made up of civilians like myself, firefighters, and in some cases, law enforcement officers. The primary responsibility for the care of these canines falls directly to the handler. These dogs live with us and they become part of our family. We will care for these dogs through their retirement, through the remainder of their life. A majority of all of the canine's expenses also fall to the handler. These include food, routine veterinary care, as well as if the dog is faced with illness or injury. Training equipment expenses and as well as other training expenses are also borne very often by the handler. Sponsoring agencies may provide some funding for these expenses, but the provision of this support will vary throughout the system. Dogs are typically purchased or adopted by the handler, though some system sponsoring agencies will provide dogs for their handlers, but again, this is variable. We require our canines from multiple sources. Some handlers choose to receive their dogs as puppies and train them. Others, like myself, purchase dogs from a private kennel that has a started dog program where they will receive some of their foundation training and then ultimately will finish their training with their handler who must certify with those dogs as a single handler dog team. Some organizations also provide, non-governmental organizations will provide dogs through foundations. Currently, we have 255 nationally certified live find teams among the 28 system task forces. The average age of the dog is about 6.5 years. Laboratory retrievers make up about 60% of the dogs within the FEMA USAR system. That's followed by Belgian Malinois at about 13%, Golden Retrievers, German Shepherds, mixed breeds, and some other breeds will make up the urban search and rescue live find dogs. In 2014, we began a system of certifying human remains detection dogs. They had no formal role within the urban search and rescue system prior to that time, and they still are not a mandatory requirement. Unlike the live find dogs, is that no USAR team is deployable without at least four certified dogs to go out the door with them. They are a mandatory requirement. The primary role of the USAR task forces is to identify, obviously, live victims. But when all live victims have been accounted for, but there remains people among the missing, the human remains detection dogs are deployed to help bring closure to the victims and the families associated with the disaster. This was exemplified in 2014 following the massive mudslide in Oso, Washington. After local and state responses were overwhelmed, 9 task forces deployed another 20 dogs to help respond and find and locate the victims of the Oso mudslides in Washington state. At the cessation of operations, when all teams were demobilized, all but one of the victims were brought home to their family. Sorry. In conclusion, I would just like to tell you what a valuable asset these dogs are to the national USAR system, and it's been my honor to serve as a handler.
Thank you. Thank you for your statement, Dr. Brown. Chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes. I'm going to start with Mr. Montes, I think. What can you tell us about any challenges that exist for canines at ports of entry and checkpoints that might inhibit the team's ability to detect contraband and drugs? Maybe physical challenges, maybe airflows, things that you know that we don't think about that maybe we should know about that help us understand your difficulty or the challenge for your team.
So, yes, sir. So as the director of the CBP Canine Training Program, the scope of my responsibilities where I stand is to work hand in hand with the operational components to understand the challenges they have in their respective areas. This is where I would ask that Mr. Jaques can kind of speak to those operational challenges they face, and in partnership in the training center, we can build those training environments to replicate or emulate those challenges that they have.
Mr. Jaques?
So, sir, for the checkpoint scenario that we basically deploy the majority of our canines to, the canine handlers are trained to take into account, you know, the air, the cones, the scent cone, the canopy, the direction of the wind, the heat, all the variables that go with handling the canine. Those handlers know the canine best.
So let me move to something that's maybe not as sensational, but it's important to, at least to people that I'm privileged to represent. In the short amount of time that I've been here, we've dealt with I represent a pretty large fruit belt in south central Pennsylvania. Over the last few years, we've dealt with a thing called the plum pox, the stink bug, and I suspect maybe you know what I'm talking about the stink bug, and a thing called the ash borer, which, as far as I can tell, is going to effectively wipe out every ash tree in the country. Are dogs, is that a capability that they can be trained to detect a certain insect? I think, but well, maybe a stink bug, right? But I don't know about an ash borer. Is that something that, from an agricultural standpoint, man, how far can you go? Is that something you consider, just out of curiosity? Because it's a big deal where we live.
So, absolutely. So if there is a recognizable odor, you can train a dog to find it. So if there is something that we can imprint, an odor that we can imprint on the canine, we can use the natural canine's drives and behaviors to train them to focus on that. I guess the best example would be bed bugs.
Okay. Do you, I mean, is that a thing that the Department of Agriculture works with you on, trying to determine potential incoming threats? I mean, how do you target? I mean, once it's here, it's here. It's too late, right? I mean, not that you want more, but once the ash borer got here, I mean, literally, you can see a stand of ash trees in a season, they're dead, they're all gone, and they're not, you know, it's 100-year-old trees never coming back. So, I mean, is there any proactive measures to? I think it's probably a big deal for industry and for economies, whether it's your fruits or you know, people make baseball bats out of ash trees, right? Or at least they used to. If you're a baseball player, that's a big deal. So, how do we get? I mean, do we get in front of it, or is there kind of after the fact that we're trying to keep, you know, more from coming, whether it's turtles, whether it's snakes, whether it's insects, or what have you? How does that work? How does that work out?
So currently, as we speak, we as far as it within the canine program that I manage, the training component that we have not had that conversation. This is something that we can definitely take a question for the record and get with USDA and the Office of Field Operations to inquire if there were or have been or are having conversations in reference to that particular.
So I mean, somebody must develop a list, right, of what we don't want coming in the country? Or is it just anything, any live animal, any insect, any plant material? Is it all of it can't come in? Who develops that list? Where is that determined?
I think the list of invasive species, sir, is exclusive with the USDA, and working with the agricultural component of the Office of Field Operations, they would be able to better speak to that, how that process would go as far as identifying an invasive species and any corrective measures that they would put to prevent that infestation.
Okay. This might be a little bit of a morbid question, but I think it's a curiosity probably everybody's wondering about, but doesn't want to ask, and maybe you didn't think about it till you were here. But Dr. Brown, how do you train / keep current a cadaver dog?
Well, similar to any detection dog, we have cadaver source material. So just as in explosive dogs or narcotics dogs, we have training aids that are really human.
Where does cadaver source material? I hate this, but
It
where
is,
does that come
it is literally human remains.
Yeah, right. So
Yes.
where does that come from?
So we, depending on the jurisdiction, because this is very variable by state, and every state will have its law as far as who can obtain and maintain human remains. So in different jurisdictions, it's much more difficult or much more easy to be able to have a cadaver dog to and have source
Is
for that. So
that a licensing requirement, and where do you keep the material, and how long do you leave it out? I mean, I got just my mind's awash with the specifics. I can't help myself.
So, for example, I'll have source materials such as teeth, bone, placenta. We'll work with people that have donated their bodies for scientific use.
Okay.
And there's chain of custody requirements based on the state as far as a source gets transferred as far as that goes.
This is a little specific, and maybe it's unpleasant, but do you have to leave it out a certain amount of days, or is there there different standards or?
Certainly, you maintain a training log, and depending on, again, if we're talking law enforcement, it's a bit different standard than we're talking disaster. But certainly, we look at different times of decomposition.
Right.
So very often, storage will freeze our source, just so it stops the decay process, and then it'll get thawed. So it will, over time, continue to decay. But then we also, especially in a disaster situation, we're also, we're always a little hungry for, I know this sounds really morbid, really hungry for fresh source, which it can be very difficult. In our situation, it
Yeah, I
can
don't
be
know
a
if
little
I'd
bit
use the term
difficult to.
hungry in the
Yeah.
description, but
Sorry.
yeah, I get what you're
But it can be difficult to obtain and maintain source,
okay, it's
which is a
interesting.
challenge for a lot of people that train human remains detection.
There's little
dogs.
things we don't think of, and from a policy perspective,
Yeah,
if there's
and-
something we need to know there to make a difference, it'd be an opportune time to tell us. I'm spending a lot more time than I'm
Yeah.
supposed to with the committee's indulgence. One final question. I imagine a person in your position sees things that many people never see or don't want to see, and they potentially have an impact on you. Do you have access to the same services that maybe a police officer or other law enforcement or emergency service personnel might need access to based on your experiences, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, we get training in critical incident stress management, and certainly as a task force, as people come home from deployment, that is followed through our medical team
Okay.
as far as that
And
goes.
if there's things and items or issues specific to that question that need to be addressed, it would also be a good time to let us know on the committee. Take the opportunity. I appreciate it. With that, way long, privileged to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Correa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just informed that Ms. Barragan has to leave and has a couple of questions, so I would, with your permission, defer to her for quick questions
Without
before I
objection.
go.
Thank you. Thank you all for your service. I had an opportunity to come out a little early and get to meet the dogs who did their exercise, and it was just really neat to see them in action and to see how they contribute to the security of our country and the work that the men and women do in your department. So thank you for that. I represent the Port of Los Angeles, which is, we call it America's Port. It's America's largest port by volume. And I've seen in some of the literature some work that the K9 units do at seaports, but I haven't had a chance to see any when I've been down there. Do you know if there are any K9 units down in the Los Angeles port?
So I know that there's K9 units deployed in the Los Angeles field office, particularly where they're actually deployed. We'd have to get back to you exactly where that is.
Okay. Do you know what kind of work K9s would be used for at the seaports around our country?
Absolutely. So the K9s that are utilized within the officer field operations go through our training centers, either one of our training centers in El Paso and Front Royal. Those K9s are trained for the basic odors of narcotics and concealed humans. So that basic foundation of law enforcement requirement that's put on these K9s, those are deployed universally across CBP, whether it's within the officer field operations or the United States Border Patrol.
Okay, great. I also know that I was down at the airport the other day, had TSA meet me as well as CBP. I know that TSA utilizes K9 teams at more than 100 of the nation's airports, mass transit, and maritime systems, and recently deployed K9 teams to airports in Baltimore, St. Louis, Boston, and Nashville. How does TSA select which airports to deploy K9 teams to?
Thank you for that question. We use a risk-based deployment methodology. We have about 11 factors, and all of the factors and their weights are sensitive. However, they are the things that you would typically expect to find, like passenger volume. Obviously, we want to put the teams where they can screen the highest volume of people, the threat of that area, international employments, and so on.
And do you happen to know at the largest airports how, on average, how many K9 teams are used, like Atlanta, Los Angeles, Chicago?
Sure. So it really varies by airport. It depends on the passenger volume they have, the number of checkpoints, and so on. For example, Chicago is allocated 14 passenger screening K9 teams, but their Chicago Police Department has a number of teams that they also use to work in the public area and secure area. JFK has 20 teams, so it really varies by the airport.
And, you know, all the airports are very different. How do the how do the dogs adjust to the different types of layouts and settings that are at the different airports?
Thank you for that question. Similar to CBP, the handlers are trained to figure out how their partner can best work in their environment. When the teams get back from Lackland, from their training at the Canine Training Center, there's a period of acclimation where they get used to the airflow. Many airports have escalators. We don't have escalators at our training center, so we have to get the canines used to operating on the escalators and so on. So that's really the job of the handler, to figure out how to make his or her partner the most comfortable in their environment.
Great. And the last question anybody can answer is, what can Congress do to help continue to support the Canine programs and the work that you all do to protect our country?
So at this point, from where I stand as the director of the CBP K9 program, the support that we have received thus far in promoting and maintaining the consistency of our training centers to ensure that we're meeting our operational requirements. We would definitely defer to our senior leadership to identify what those operational requirements are, and in turn, from a training perspective, ensure that we are meeting, or we would develop and have available the training locations to meet those operational needs.
Similarly, from TSA's perspective, Congress has been very supportive of the program in terms of resources. So the program has expanded over time, and we greatly appreciate that, as well as your advocacy for the program. Even in many of your local jurisdictions, I know that you interact with the law enforcement that operate our canines, as well as our teams in the passenger screening queue, and we appreciate that support and advocacy.
Great. Thank you. I yield back.
The chair thanks the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Berrigan. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Montes, you train canines, right, brother?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever observed in your career, in your service for your country, a machine, any device, any man-made device that can detect explosives better than one of your well-trained dogs and its handler?
So I started my canine career, sir, 23 years ago, United States Marine Corps. And since then, I've been in and out of the canine program. Being a canine handler in the Marine Corps as an explosive handler, narcotic handler, evolving my personal career, now sitting in front of you as a director of the CP K9 program. It's one of God's most simplest designs and one of the most effective ways to utilize in such a diverse operational environment that we experience. Technology has its purposes, but technology as well has its challenges. These canines have these innate abilities, as we demonstrated earlier today, these drives just to work for a toy. So there's no better design, in my opinion, sir, than a canine to utilize in the various operational environments that we experience within the United States.
Thank you for your candid and thorough answer, sir. I ask that because our job on this committee is to protect the citizenry of our country. But at the same time, we're a nation that faces a $20 trillion debt. And we are faced with decisions to make regarding what's the best means by which to protect the American citizens within our homeland. And it occurs to me, in my experience, I have a military background in law enforcement, canines work damn well. And they're much less expensive than million-dollar machinery, and they're pretty easy to maintain. So I'm going to ask you this, sir. Can your dogs detect Composition 4, C4, and Semtex?
So, sir, for the Customs and Border Protection, we currently don't train our dogs on explosives, sir.
Who should I address that question to? Ms. Harvey?
Sir, the full list of explosives that our teams are trained on is sensitive security information, and we can share that with you in another setting.
Roger that. Ms. Harvey, this question would be directed at you, ma'am, as Director of Office of Security Operations for the TSA. I'm specifically focused on TSA and explosive detection, And I would ask you, ma'am, as a traveler yourself, no doubt
I do.
you traverse through the airports of our nation. Would you feel safer on an aircraft with passengers and baggage that has been checked by one machine or two dogs with their handlers?
Thank you for that question. Canines are incredibly effective. They can do things that we can't even measure with the machines. I feel very safe when the passengers and the baggage have been screened by a canine.
Thank you for your answer. Mr. Chairman, it's my humble suggestion to this committee that as we move forward in making considered recommendations for the full committee regarding the expenditure of the people's treasure, that we recall this conversation from the experts and boots on the ground. I myself find that a canine team, a well-trained canine team with a good handler, is the most effective means by which to detect explosive substance. And as a traveler, a frequent traveler, I feel quite safe when I see canine teams in the airport. And with that, I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentleman. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Correa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say I want to follow up on some of Mr. Higgins' comments. I think he's on to something here. As I mentioned, I took a tour of the border a few weeks ago. The most crossed border probably in the world is the San Ysidro border. A lot of cars, a lot of people flowing through that on a daily basis. And my question would be is, are you fully staffed in terms of having canine units to do your job properly, not only there but in the rest of the country? Because if your answers to Mr. Higgins were that canine units are, best, and I would imagine, Dr. Carrick, that we can probably train those canine units to do even more in the future. Question being the Treasury, our budgetary challenges, but again, balancing our budgetary challenges versus safety of our country, safety of our citizens. Question is, are we short on these canine units? Can we use more in terms of investing in this kind of defense for our country? Open it up.
Well, sir, I'd like to, if you could please specify where exactly are you looking at in terms of deployment for the canines? Between
Thank
the
you
ports
very-
or at the ports?
I would say all of the above, because I think the defense of our country is at airports, ports of entry, their vehicles, ships, airplanes, all of the above.
So between the ports of entry for the Border Patrol, we are under staffing requirement currently with the canines, but we work with OTD to get as close to that as possible. We rely heavily on the field to tell us what they can use and what they can deploy. We don't want to give them assets that they can't deploy, so yes, we're understaffed, but not to detriment of our operation. Does that make sense?
I can restate the answer, because if you're understaffed, that means that there are, I don't want to put words in your mouth, sir, but if you're understaffed, that means that you could use more.
So our
But
canine
it's not at the detriment of your operations, but I guess, if I may restate my question, should we be looking at investing more on canine units as opposed to, as Mr. Higgins alluded, other technologies, other areas in our defense of our country?
So while I'm biased for the canine program,
We're all biased. We
very
love those
biased for the
dogs.
canine program, it does take a mix of technology, manpower, and tools, and canines are a tool. But there are other tools that we need on the border as well. So to me, it's a combination of all those aspects put together to secure the border.
So, if I may, I'm going to ask Ms. Harvey a question, which is, can you compare the success rate or effectiveness of canine explosive detection teams versus human screening methods,
So similar to
including technology?
Sure. So Yes, we know the effectiveness of the canines. They're very effective at detecting explosives. When you go through a checkpoint, there are a number of other things, or your baggage goes through screening, there are a number of other things that TSA is looking for. There are prohibited items that canines can't find, and that's where our layered approach works. For example, guns and knives aren't things that our canines are trained to detect. So it does take a layered system.
They are trained to detect or not?
They are not trained to detect knives or guns. They're trained solely on explosives.
Okay. So it's a layered defense then that we're talking about. So, for example, at our border crossings, then you would have both X-ray machines and K9 units.
So I can only speak to the airports.
Okay.
Sorry.
Anybody else speak there?
Yeah, absolutely, sir. So we like to use this terminology, bad guys are like water. They're going to flow through the path of least resistance. So if you have an enforcement posture at a port of entry, whether it's an NII technology, X-ray technology, canine technology, or even the fine officers and agents that are working at the port of entry, as soon as we start to close that noose, that's going to now they're going to try to find another area of vulnerability. This is where the Office of Field Operations, the United States Border Patrol work hand in hand. As a director of the CP K9 program, I sit down with my counterparts to determine how effective our canine units are out in the field, and what do we need to increase or amend in our training environments. So there is definitely a comprehensive, multi-layered approach to where all these mechanisms, systems in place, whether it's technology or canines and manpower, all contribute to our law enforcement operations to prevent illicit items and goods from entering the United States.
Final question is, anybody out there, the Viper program is, the administration is proposing cuts to the program. How will this affect our defense of our country? How will this affect your staffing, your canine units available to do your job?
Sir, well, our canine, so TSA canine units, whether they're law enforcement or TSA handlers, they sometimes participate in the Viper operations. Our funding does not come from that program. So we have seen no cut in the canine program as a result of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chair thanks the ranking member. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we get started, this is Law Enforcement Week, and I just want to thank all the men and women in the room that work in law enforcement, protecting our country in your various capacities. That goes for the canines as well. We appreciate the work that the dogs do to keep our country safe at the ports of entry, against drug smuggling, against weapons, other things in airports. So thank you. God bless you for what you do, and I want to let you know that you're in our thoughts and prayers, not just this week, but always, every single day, and we appreciate what you do. And I speak on behalf of the members of the 3rd Congressional District, people I represent in South Carolina, but I think I speak for the nation. We do a law enforcement appreciation tour across my district, and one thing I've noticed, Mr. Chairman, is historically, people have gone up to men and women in military uniforms and thanked them for their service to the country. But what we're seeing now, folks going up to law enforcement, first responders all across, and saying thank them, thank you for what you do, keep our nation safe, keep our communities safe, keep our families and our neighbors and our property safe. So it's all inclusive for law enforcement. So again, I say thanks. I traveled back a number of years ago down to the Nogales sector in Arizona, and while we were there was an inland checkpoint, not at the border. We went to the border, of course, but there was a checkpoint. I don't want to give away where it is, some miles inland, maybe 30, I don't know. And it was a canopy over the road. And canines were used to check the cars as they came through. And I saw the efforts of the smugglers to thwart the dogs, sometimes having the drugs 3 cars back, but having multiple cars with indicators on it that the dogs would hit on, so those cars could be pulled out of line, distracting the officers and the canines while that car was being searched so that the contraband could come through. It's a challenge every day for you guys, I realize that. One thing that struck me, though, was how hot it was. It was a shaded area, but it was just an open shelter over the highway. There was a canine kennel that was air-conditioned. I don't think the men and women had the air conditioning. I think the dogs did. I was proud of that. But I also had conversations with the folks with CBP there and ICE about future plans to make that more of a permanent facility with good facilities for the men and women that were working the checkpoint, but also for the canines. Can you tell me, is that has that happened? Have they, I guess, built that out? Is that a problem in multiple checkpoints across the Southwest, particularly because of the extreme temperatures that take a toll on the dogs? We were told that over and over, the toll that the heat takes on the canines. So I would love for you to talk about what the facilities are like, specifically with the canines, but you can be general, and what we can do to try to help facilitate making sure that facilities like that in Nogales were, or in the Nogales sector, were up to the needs of the men and women. So, Mr. Montes, if you want to talk about that, we come all the way across.
Absolutely, sir. So from a training perspective, this is where myself and Mr. Jaquez, my counterpart, we discuss how we train our canines. So right now we have a canine entity or an academy in El Paso, Texas, and we have one in Front Row, Virginia. The one in El Paso, Texas has the environment and the climate so that when we train our canines, when Mr. Jaquez makes that operational request, we take those canines, we send them to El Paso, Texas, we train them in that environment so they are acclimatized. Because ideally, these canines will not be able to work under a sheltered environment, under a covered environment. They're usually normally working in austere environments. As for the infrastructure of these checkpoints, I would defer to Mr. Jaquez to answer that, sir.
Mr. Duncan, so for the checkpoints, of course, we analyze the priorities across the board to see where the funding goes for each checkpoint, each facility. We have a lot of facilities across the board in the Border Patrol that require updates. But as far as it relates to the canine, they are the primary concern. The handlers will make sure when that canine is deployed and when he's put up. If the dog is suffering from heat stress, dehydration, that handler is trained to make that decision and not keep the dog out in that element.
Chime in on that. I would like to know what kind of toll it takes on the dogs working in that hot environment day in, day out, and maybe how many dogs you have to have in rotation.
So,
have you had any loss of life in the canine area from
every year with the Border Patrol, because our canines are out there in the element every day, every year we send out a policy reminder for heat stress to make sure that our canine handlers are up to speed. We also have a bi-weekly training where we train the handlers to keep an eye on the dog, and we identify any deficiencies between the team. The primary responsibility is the care and maintenance of that canine. It's a foremost for the handler and the instructors in the field. When it comes to deployment of the canine, we try to rotate the canines through the checkpoint as much as possible. If at all possible, you want to have a nose on the point as much throughout the day as possible. They don't necessarily have to sniff every vehicle, but they're there air sending all the traffic coming through the checkpoint. So it's not necessarily as much work as it would be putting a nose to every seam on the vehicle. Does that make sense?
Thank you. My time's expired. It's up to the chairman
If I may. So from a training perspective, when the Border Patrol agents and the OFO officers come to our academy, they receive a robust training in first aid to identify these fatigues in these canines, to understand how and when to deploy their canines in the field. That all starts in the academy. So as they go back, that first initial training that we provide them in our academies on basic canine first aid, that now evolves when they go back and they work for their training supervisors in the field and as senior mentor handlers to ensure that they're deploying their canines within their capabilities so they're not succumbing to some kind of heat illness or distress.
Do you ever have any animal rights activists show up and complain about dogs being used in that heat? Is that a factor?
At the training center, no, we haven't had anybody come to complain as far as us training our dogs. We have an open door policy. We try to provide as many visits that have been vetted to show them what we do, to show them that our canines within CBP receive the optimal best veterinary care, the optimal best housing. So these are our partners. These are our law enforcement partners. It is our responsibility, and it starts at the Canine Center, to ensure that we are picking the absolute best dog, the absolute best health, so that when this canine goes to the field, it can work optimally in an operational environment. As well as that, so when we talk about the continual life, we want to make sure that our canines in the field work for a relative 7 to 9 years, so that they now can have a reasonable retired life, because we do ask of them very much.
Yeah. Thank you. My time's expired. I appreciate the leniency, Mr.
Chair thanks the gentleman from South Carolina. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the committee for allowing me to participate in this. Just want to point out an article that was in the Wall Street Journal Saturday, in the Saturday-Sunday edition, March 25th, 2017, that says dogs still beat technology in the smell test. And I'd like to enter that into the record, if I may. Mr. Carrick, you said they're the best and most mobile detection asset available. I think that.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that. And then, Mr. Montez, you said the bad guys are going to seek the path of least resistance. That said, doesn't it make sense to do more in terms of perimeter security at our airports, our transportation hubs, by utilizing dogs, particularly on the, like I said, on the perimeter, or perhaps inside before you go through the checkpoints?
So from TSA's perspective, yes, we do actually use, we have over 800 teams that are deployed at airports across the country, and they work at a variety of locations. They're very mobile, as Dr. Carrick said. They work in the public area. They also work in the security area to screen for any insiders who might intend to do us harm, as well as at our checkpoint.
There's not a constant presence.
There's not.
There's not even a constant presence at DCA. You pull up to the curb and you see a squad car, police car, but you don't see a dog. And I spent 3 hours in the Delta line a few weeks ago when the thunderstorms canceled all our flights, hundreds of people, and there was no patrols with dogs or anything. And it concerns me that we're not doing that in light of what happened in Brussels and I think, was it Turkey? We had an incident, and of course we had the baggage claim incident at Fort Lauderdale. Let me ask you this, Ms. Harvey. I think you were funded at $121.7 million. Are you adequately funded for your K9 units?
Yeah, so in FY17, actually, Congress funded us for 50 additional teams.
Mm-hmm.
So we are busy training and deploying those teams, and that brings us to a total of 1,047.
Where do you get your dogs?
A variety of sources. So we are co-located with the Military Working Dog Program that DOD runs, and we have an interagency agreement with DOD. We use the same vendors that they use for the majority of our dogs. We also have a couple of agreements with domestic vendors from which we also get.
Who are they?
I am not familiar with the whole list of the vendors that we have.
Are any of the dogs foreign sourced?
Through DOD, yes, some of their vendors are overseas vendors.
Dr. Brown, are any of your dogs foreign sourced?
No.
Thank you. You know, the administration has an emphasis on Buy American, and it just seems to me it would make sense that you would prefer American dogs and American-trained dogs over foreign-sourced dogs, particularly the vendors that train them from puppies. Why do you have a preference in any context for a foreign-sourced dog?
Sure. So we don't actually have a preference for foreign-sourced dogs. However, we have a large requirement for a large number of dogs.
Let me ask you this. Do you not have an adequate supply of American-sourced dogs?
We are working very closely with our domestic vendors to build up that supply, but we have not identified a large enough supply domestically to do that.
Have you fulfilled the contracts that you have with American companies?
We're working very closely with the vendors that we have. Those agreements are new.
The answer is no. You haven't fulfilled all your contracts. And that's part of what bothers me is we don't have the perimeter security that I think is necessary at our airports and our rail transportation and other transportation hubs. You're not utilizing all of the assets that are available to you in terms of your funding, and you don't have enough dogs but there's contracts out there for dogs that you haven't fulfilled. I'd
So-
like for you to check into that.
Thank you, we will.
I yield the balance of my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, thanks to the gentleman from Alabama. Before we close, maybe I have one more question, and I think the ranking member has some thoughts. Ms. Harvey, there was a line of questioning from Ms. Berrigan that kind of piqued my curiosity when you talked about how teams are stationed at airports based on traffic and so on and so forth. And I understand some of this might be of sensitive nature, and if it is, I will expect you to refrain and just tell me we need to talk about that somewhere else. But can I make the presumption or assumption that the stationing of the units is based on a threat matrix that is reviewed on a somewhat regular or scheduled basis, and then assets are moved based on that, as well as traffic density and volume, et cetera?
Yes, in fact, in 2016, we did relocate 28 of our passenger screening K9 teams from smaller, lower risk locations to some of the higher risk locations. We do review that.
Is there anything that Congress needs to do or information that you need to get that you don't currently have or struggle to get regarding the efficacy of the threat matrix, the timeliness, and your ability to move assets adequately, timely? Is there anything lacking there for which there's something that we're in the way or we're holding up that we could make a difference for you?
No, I don't think so. I think we have all of the authorities we need. We review the threat matrix, as you call it, pretty regularly, and we have authority to move the teams around.
Do you have a different name for it? That's the name, but I'm a military guy, so, you know, that's what I use. But if you can school me, what's the correct terminology? I want to be, I don't want to be disrespectful.
It's the same thing. We call it a risk-based allocation.
Okay, all right, risk-based allocation. Okay, so bottom line is, as far as you're concerned at this very moment in time, you have the adequate tools for your risk-based allocation to do the job as necessary?
Yes, sir.
All right, with that, I recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank all of the folks that are here today in testimony, and also as police officers, peace officers, I also want to join my colleagues in thanking you for service to our country, our citizens, as well as to our canines as well. As I'm hearing all of the testimony, not only from my witnesses, but also my colleagues here, I'm trying to put it all together, because as a policymaker, as an American policymaker, member of this committee, you know, I always pray that the day never comes when the bad guys bust through and score on us again. And so, you know, as I try to put the big picture together here, Ms. Harvey, you talk about allocation of resources from low threat to high threat. It tells me that maybe we need more resources to cover both bases, because I think, Mr. Montes, you said the bad guys are like water that flows from, you know, to that area of
They're
higher.
like water, sir. They're gonna extort the path of least resistance.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I'm convinced, I think you all, although you say you have adequate resources, I think this is an area you could use more resources. My colleague from Alabama says, you know, you're not buying enough of these resources from American sources, and it tells me maybe you're not ordering enough of these resources from American sources. But again, not putting words in your mouth, but I walk away from this hearing even more convinced than before that we need to invest more in our canine units. Very cost effective. Dr. Carrick, I think you're saying that we can train them to do even more, and I think we got to go in that direction to defend our country, protect our citizenry, and to make sure that you do the best job you can in protecting our country.
Yes,
With that, Mr. Chair, I yield the remainder of my time.
Chair, thanks to gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we're really privileged to have you here today and learn a little bit about your world that we don't really think about, unfortunately, most of the time, right? When we see you, see the dogs, then it's on our mind. But, you know, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, you're out there. And especially on this week, it's important to acknowledge your significant contributions and to say thank you very much. We appreciate your efforts and your sacrifice to keep us safe. And we want to be helpful. And so if there's something that comes to mind after the hearing, that you think we need to know that would be critical to assisting and aiding you in performing your duties and completing your mission effectively. We need to know that, and we encourage you to reach out and make sure that we have that information, and we'll see if we can do our level best to make sure you're adequately equipped and whatever you need, whatever it is that you need. If there's a shortcoming, we want to be there for you. So with that, we thank you very, very kindly for your attention today and for your time away from wherever it is you work, and for the dog's attendance as well. Mr. Montez?
Yes, I'd like to add one last thing in there. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak here today. Today, you saw a small example of the capabilities of these canines. And within CBP, we have such a dynamic and diverse environment. I do extend an invitation to yourself, sir, and your representatives as well, to come and visit either one of our facilities so that you can get a global scope of how the Office of Training and Development, the United States Border Patrol, and the Office of Field Operations work together to ensure that our training environments emulate, if not replicate, the operational environment so that our effectiveness is top-notch.
I appreciate that. I'm sure we'll consider taking you up on it. We'll have to take a look at the travel schedule. Front Royal's pretty close, the other one's a little far, but maybe we could do something there. Anyhow, we've got some votes, so the chair now thanks the witnesses for the valuable testimony and the members for their questions. Members may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask you to respond to these in writing pursuant to committee rule 7 Delta. The hearing record will remain open for 10 days without objection. The subcommittee stands adjourned.